Welcome, everybody, to the second episode of Ready to Diagram, the first basketball podcast to put basketball first. I'm Bowser the Bowser, coming live on your web browser, all about the green, like my name's Sam Hauser. And as always, I'm kicking it like Reggie Miller with my co-host, confidant, and close friend, the bucket filler from Manila, the Filipino Grigio, the man even AI couldn't answer. Mr. If you care about your health, stay out of the gym, because even two of you can't take half of him. He's the heavenly Evin Gilberto. Our topic today is predictable defense. Is predictable defense partly to blame for this unprecedented offensive surge in recent years in the NBA? And we're going to look at two more innovative, younger defenses, OKC and Sacramento, and how they can overachieve by not doing predictable defense. So, predictable defense. On a recent podcast, JJ Redick said that good defense is predictable. For the past 10 to 20 years or so, NBA defense has followed the same guiding principles. Never help off the strong side corner, always help off the weak side corner. If the pick and roll is going to the right, tag it from the left, stuff like that. And the best defenses would make those rotations the best. Good defenses are dependable, reliable, and predictable. But the question is, does good defense even exist anymore? The best defense in the NBA right now would have ranked in the bottom half of the league just 6 years ago. The second best defense in the NBA right now would have been the second worst in the league 6 years ago. To put in perspective how recent 6 years, it feels like long, but that was when Markelle Fultz was a rookie. Markelle Fultz is 25 years old. So in the career of a 25-year-old NBA player, we've seen the second worst defense become the second best. We've seen a bottom half defense become the best, all right? And this is not kindergarten. There are more than one contributing factors to the rise in offense. The one that I haven't seen people talk about is predictable defense. Now, we'll go over what that really means by predictable defense and why the norms are the norms and how, young teams, especially OKC, Sacramento, Houston, Orlando, they can punch above their weight. They can overachieve by not just doing predictable defense. Evin, how do you feel so far?
I'm right there with you. So, the whole framework is, this, I know this. Actually, most people who haven't never even coached know this is you would rather have know exactly what your defense is supposed to be doing versus not. Because what is the thing that I don't necessarily know if a lot of people say it, but I say it quite often, is if you watch a possession of basketball and you're paying attention to the defense and you've never seen what this team does defensively, you don't really notice unless something goes wrong. So right, if all things are equal, you can't tell that somebody messes up until somebody messes up. You can't tell what the assignment is supposed to be. You can eventually flesh it out, but predictable defense is like the hallmark of basketball, really. It's like, that's how offenses are set to manipulate. But yeah, that's how I feel about it. Is if you know what to expect defensively, then like you're good. Now, whether the offense can do enough to hurt you, that's an entirely different matter.
Yeah, to me, it feels like, like when you teach AI how to play a game, and then they're like, oh, like if AI is in charge of, let's say, a Madden game, they're like, oh, the Hail Mary play is the statistically best play in football. So it's like, we're going to do the best play over and over and over again, right? Like, There's a reason the norms, the predictability of defense, there's a reason the status quo is the status quo. The problem is not that the status quo is wrong. The problem is that the status quo is predictable. There are good reasons for the rules that we're going to talk about in a second. The problem is not that the rules exist. The problem is that the offense knows the defense is going to follow those rules and they can game the system. Okay? One of those rules is never help off the strong side corner. About 20 years ago, according to some research I was doing before this pod, in 2004, Popovich and the Spurs kind of discovered, hey, the corner three is one of the most efficient shots in basketball. And they exploited this. They exploited it so much that never help off the strong side corner became a hard and fast rule. And it's a good rule. corner threes are made more than 39% of the time, which is better than the best NBA team's 3-point percentage, right? You don't want to give up a corner three. The problem is not that you should help off the strong side corner. The problem is that the offense knows you won't. So sometimes you'll see a player on the right wing. There's one example with Josh Green versus Detroit Pistons a few years ago. He is driving off the right wing off a go and catch, a stampede cut, whatever you want to call it. He's driving off the right wing. The defender in the right corner closes out to his man because that's called a one-way stunt. The corner defender is sometimes told to start in the gap, but as the ball gets closer to you, you get closer to your man, right? That's a one-way stunt, whereas a two-way stunt is where you start by your man, you stunt to the middle, and you revert to your man. So when you close out to your man on the strong side corner, you are creating a wider driving lane for the ball handler. But if you stunt and recover, we have a Duncan Robinson example coming up. If you stunt and recover, the offensive player knows that's not a real stunt. They know it's fake. They know the rule, never help off the strong side corner. And so what they will do on purpose, it's easy. When you know what the defense is going to do, it's an easy read. Now, in the last episode, I had an aha moment when I saw Jackson Hayes on the baseline drive make a live dribble skip pass to the weak side wing. One of our followers, Jonathan, said I took a shot at Jackson Hayes. Maybe I did. But to me, I don't think that's a shot at Jackson Hayes. I think that's a shot at NBA defenses for not innovating. Because when you have predictable rotations, when the offense knows how you will react in certain situations, they know the weak side wing is being left open. So we have 7-footers making baseline skip passes because it's easy to drill that into him. And it's not a Jackson Hayes thing. It's Clint Capela can be a reliable short roll playmaker because you can teach basically, if you can make it in the NBA, you could be taught how to make reads in the short roll 99% of the time. Clint Capela has become a reliable short roll playmaker, partially because short roll is when the defense blitzes a pick and roll. So they put two defenders are blitzing, trapping Trae Young as he runs a pick and roll. Clint Capela will stop short on his roll. He'll stop at the free throw line as like a release valve from Trae Young. And then he has a 4-on-3 advantage. And if you know, always help from the weak side or always help from the two-man side, whatever the defensive rule is, if you know where the help is coming from, Clint Capela has to make one read, to make one pass to get an open shot for his team, right? And these are the smartest decisions, the same way that maybe running I know it's not, but let's say running a Hail Mary is the most effective play in a Madden game. But if you do it every single time, it becomes less effective. A more real-life example, I think, people talked about this with the James Harden ISO ball Rockets, the 5-out Rockets. Because he was on a tear on the ISO, so they stopped running pick and rolls. Speaking of Clint Capela, they stopped running pick and rolls. They traded Clint Capela. They go 5-out. They put their worst shooter in the strong side corner. The worst shooter would be the guy you would want to help off as a defense, but you can't because he's strong side corner. So they're gaming the system. And so Harden was phenomenal in ISO ball because that's the most effective play. But when you do the same play over and over again, when you do the same rotations over and over again, it becomes less effective. All right. It's like if your best pitch in baseball is a fastball and you only throw fastballs, right? You better have a really, really fast fastball. I don't know any more about baseball. I'm going to skip off of this because you're going to say something back about baseball and I'm going to be like, Kyle Ripken? I don't know anyone else. All right. Back to basketball. Let's do some screen sharing of the orthodox, the standard of most NBA defenses over the past 20 years. The execution is different, but we put together a little compilation in case, you want a refresher or whatever. This first one is an example of Duncan Robinson in the right corner. He's going to be helping out the strong side corner. So it's like kind of up top Chicago action to get Trae Young a handoff. So one of the standard rules of the past 20 years is never help off the strong side corner. Trae Young knows that Duncan Robinson might stunt, but he's going to recover. And a lot of defenses, they tell their players, you can stunt as long as you can recover, as long as you don't give up the three. Now, the Miami Heat, they don't always do it, but just we're using these examples of what the norms are. The fact that some teams are not doing the norms is the entire point of this podcast. All right. So Duncan Robinson, the green arrow, is going to stunt. He's going to slip, and he gives up the corner three to Wesley Matthews. This is exactly what teams are trying to avoid when they say don't help out the strong side corner. All right. Duncan Robinson, if you see that, he sort of slips as he's trying to revert back to the corner, and that's why corner three. All right, second example is you always tag a pick and roll from the backside. If the pick and roll ball handler is going to his right, you tag it from his left. So in this example, Trae Young is getting a pick and roll to go to his right. So you're going to tag it from the left side, okay? Which means Alex Caruso, who's guarding Bogdanovic in this weak side corner, he's going to be the tagger, okay? The reason you tag from this side is that the pass to Bogey and on the backside is a harder pass, it's a harder read. Trae can barely even see Bogey. He knows where he's going to be because he's Trae Young, but he can barely see Bogey. And the pass, even if he makes it, has to go over 4 different people to get there. It has to be a lob, slower pass, more time to recover, okay? If you help off the right side, if the ball handler is going to his right, if you help off the right side, B or C is going to be wide open. Trae Young is going to see it. It's right in his field of vision. He doesn't have to turn his head to see it. And the pass doesn't have to be a lob. It can be a line drive pass into the shooting pocket. So you help off the backside because you know Alex Caruso is going to be the tagger. So you put your best shooter, you put Bogdanovic over here to try to game the system. All right. Here's why you don't tag off the strong side, off the near side of the ball. Maxey is getting a double pick and roll to go to his right. DeJounte Murray is guarding D'Anthony Melton in the right corner, but he's going to come in and tag. Now, Atlanta has been doing this. They've been tagging from both sides. It does not work here. I like the innovation. I like to try something new. We'll see other examples of it working later on. It does not work here, and this is why you typically don't tag from this corner. You want to give up the green pass, the lob pass, the skip pass to the weak side instead of the pink pass, the line drive pass to Melton, who's going to make this open three because you're tagging off the near corner. Now, some people call it the strong side, some people call it the weak side. It's confusing. I'm going to try to avoid those terms when talking about the pick and roll. Any thoughts so far?
Right. So the one thing I wanted to say is these are NBA staples that you can see kind of trickle down to other levels. As I talked about last week, I coach at the high school level. We're working on peel switching. But the thing about it is if we go back to that clip, the reason why you defend most pick and rolls that way is because most teams don't have to deal with a Trae Young. So that cross-court hook skip on the money, that's not something most players can make with enough time and velocity to even get there to empty out the contest, right? So
yeah, to your point, one of the best pick and roll manipulators, playmakers, can only get his team a contested three in that example. You do that because one of the best pick and roll ball handlers in the league, Trae Young, the best he can do is get a contested three for Bogdanovic, all right? And the other thing I should mention, you mentioned it at the lower levels, NBA courts have shorter three-point lines in the corner, shorter, easier, more valuable. I don't know this for certain, but I remember a study one time that said in the college level where the three-point line is always the same length, the corner three is not more valuable. Now, there are other factors. How open are you? Is it off the dribble, off the pass? But I've heard that the shorter three-point line in the corner is why corner threes are more valuable in NBA basketball than they are on lower levels. I should feel the need to point that out. Yeah, that's even Trae Young against the standard, the norm of status quo of defense can run a pick and roll, and he gets a contested missed three for Bogdanovic, right? So those are the norms. And I've said it before, but there are reasons the norms are the norms. The problem is not that they're the wrong norms. The problem is that the defense can game them to their advantage. All right. So Evin and I watched the Oklahoma City Sacramento game of this week because these are two teams that are tweaking the norms. And Oklahoma City caught my eye last year because without Chet Holmgren, they had the 14th best defense, and they were like the youngest NBA team in history. Young NBA teams have never had good defenses. They have I think a top 5 defense right now. Has a team that young ever been that good at defense in NBA history? I couldn't find one when I was looking. You guys are probably better at looking than I am. Please tell me if I'm wrong. But last year, one of the surprising things about Oklahoma City, so what they do is they do different defensive principles. Instead of always making the same rotation, they have a read-react approach to defense. where, as Evin mentioned last week, whichever player makes the first read is right. So instead of always helping from the same side, they will potentially help from either side, and they'll make a read. The players will make a split-second read, and the other players have to live with it, which sometimes makes mistakes. There was a three you pointed out from Sacramento. It was a messed up switch by OKC with Shai, and that gave up a three. There's also reasons the status quo is the status quo. But OKC in particular, what impressed me was that they will do things that are quote unquote wrong. They will help off the strong side corner. They will put three on the ball. Like I don't think you're ever supposed to put three on the ball in traditional, 10-year ago NBA defense. And they'll overhelp. Now last year, they had a top 10 ranking in defensive rim field goal percentage. So they were top 10 in their opponent's field goal percentage on rim attempts. They didn't have Chet. Kenrick Williams, who was 6'6" and has a negative wingspan, was playing center. Poco wasn't playing. Jay Will was 6'10", but he's not known for his verticality. They would often play a 6'3" or a 6'5" guy. Their front court was often 6'5", 6'6", 6'7". And yet they had a top 10 rim defensive field goal percentage. The guys ahead of them are like Cleveland, Minnesota. Who else was it? Basically, Jaren Jackson Jr. with Memphis, people who are known for protecting the rim, 7-footers. But they were protecting the rim without anybody taller than 6'7" to 4 most of the time. They were top 10 in rim field goal percentage, and the guy who led their team in blocks was their point guard. And I think they were able to overachieve. They had such a good rim defensive field goal percentage because they would put 2, 3, 4 guys in the paint. So if you think about it, Evin, you probably know this from if you have to read one defender or two defenders, it's an easy read. But if you don't know where the help is coming from, it's a lot. It forces you to think, as we said last week, the best thing you can do is make your opponent think. Then we were talking about defense. Now it's for the offense. So 3 defenders, you don't know where the help is coming from. Well, instead of having one 7-footer like Jaren Jackson protecting the rim, you might have 2 6'5" guys, right? And I'm really curious to see if number of people closest to the ball handler actually impacts rim field goal percentage. My hunch is that it does because I watch a lot of OKC. Now, they're capitalizing on the fact that if you complicate things for the offense, you make them think and force them to think and cause them to make the wrong decision. So Oklahoma City will sometimes help off the strong side corner. The fact that the opponent of OKC doesn't know whether they're going to help off the strong side corner slows them down. It's like, oh, is he helping? Is he not helping? You'll see OKC get a lot of charges. They'll draw a lot of charges by helping out the strong side corner. Sometimes he commits, sometimes he doesn't. And it's the ambiguity, it's the uncertainty, the unpredictability. Back to JJ Redick's point about good defense is predictable. The unpredictability, I think, is why OKC was overachieving on defense last year and this year. And I think they do things that the rest of the NBA should learn from. Should we go into the clips?
Yeah, let's do it.
This is, I think it started off as pistol action, but the first example is an example of a strong side corner peel switch. So SGA is gambling for the steal. Now, Barnes is getting to the corner. Giddy, that would be the corner defender. He's not quite all the way there, so bear with me. But this is an example of strong side corner peel switch, where OKC, I think, leads the league in defensive turnover percentage. So turnovers they cause, they make a lot of gambles. And it's my contention, to quote Good Will Hunting, that they can successfully gamble so often because of how locked in, how ready to help the defense is. I think these things are hand in hand. So here's an example. SGA gambles for the steal. He loses that gamble. Now, Giddy is going to help off the strong side corner. He's going to peel switch because SGA is going to peel off of Keon Ellis, and he's going to take Harrison Barnes. Traditional defense with the low man, JDub for the back corner. He would help, and that would create a 2-on-1 between these two guys with a weak side and Dort. All right. Typically, this gamble would give up a 3-on-2 of Ellis, Fox, and Keegan Murray against Dort and J-Dub, the weak side eye defenders. But strong side corner peel switch, all of a sudden it's not open. Now, one of the drawbacks of all this overhelping is that you're going to give up threes. They made a lot of threes, Sacramento did in this game, in the first half. Yeah, they were like shooting like 60% from three, and they were taking like 80% of the shots for three. Exaggerating. However, regression to the mean, law of averages, yada, 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 they did not keep up this hot streak in the second half, and they lost the game. So the downside of this Thunder team is you got to be, it helps to have the right personnel, but it's more about size, buy-in, engagement, quickness, feel, and less about like age and mere height. So here we have clip 2. Here's another. So Oklahoma City Thunder, strong side corner Peel switch. Here, the Kings are going to also do the same thing. So this is breaking the rule of never helping out the strong side corner. The fact that this is starting to become a trend is why we're doing the podcast. Not to contradict what I said earlier. This is against the norm of at least a few years ago. So Fox with the strong side corner is going to Peel switch when Giddey gets the ball back. Fox takes it. Keon Ellis peels off of Giddey. Now, that peel switch is how you can up off the strong side corner and not give up the corner three. Oftentimes, this pass that Giddey makes to the corner, it'll actually be stolen by his on-ball defender. Keon Ellis will peel off of Giddey. Giddey won't see him, and he'll pass to the corner to, I think that's Dort. And Keon Ellis will steal that pass. Now,
it's Dort. It's Dort.
It is Dort. Okay, I can see his number. Dort scores on this, but I think you would pretty much be okay with giving up that shot most of the time. Just because the offense scores doesn't mean the system is wrong, because no system has ever had a 0 defensive rating.
Right. Can you dial it back to that? Yeah. Just take it to the point where Giddey's beaten at that angle. So what we
right here.
Yeah, that's good there. So the reason why at the high school level, right, we do the peels is because you would rather take away the basket, right? Obviously you'd rather take away from the basket. But the idea is, if we peel this right here, even if, let's say, Fox takes the whole way, even if Dort is going to take the shot, you'd rather live with a contested three than an open paint layup, right? Because especially at the high school level, where the corner three, like to your point earlier, you don't really know if the corner three is much more valuable at the lower levels versus an NBA three where the line is shorter. But still, you would rather live with a Lou Dort or whoever in this spot contested three, because Keon Ellis can definitely be able to get there and get a hand up, as opposed to just giving up a layup because you were unwilling to help strong side corner. And then you put the pressure on the guy in the Keegan Murray spot to rotate all the way over here, right? He's gotta get there, and then we gotta X out on the backside. Like, that's all.
And who's Xing out in this example? If you think about it, for the Kings, who would be Xing out? If Keegan Murray rotated, it'd be Sabonis. Your least mobile defender has to do the most mobile rotation. More to your point.
But also, you can get a steal off of this spot. And the fact that Sabonis is all the way over here instead of in a more traditional help spot. So if this were, let's say, the high school level, right, Keegan would be closer to here, right? And then Sabonis would be like a couple steps more this way, right? Because, they'll form this eye, but you can still see both and all of that stuff. But at that point,
we always have those help defenders that we said eye on the rim line, like in the paint, parallel with both baskets. Yeah,
right. So that's why it's easier to do that, and it's becoming simpler to do that at the lower level, is because, like, what are you gonna do if a guy hits a corner three and you're contesting it? Then you gotta live, right? But because you could get 2-pointed to death in any game, but especially at the high school game, you could get 2-pointed to death for sure. So.
I also think there's a demoralizing aspect. Like, I don't think all points are created equally, even though anyone who ever took a math class is probably mad at me for saying that, because there's things that just break your spirits, that you're like, that really just takes the energy out of your defense. A contested three is not really one of those, but a wide open lane to the layup. I mentioned earlier the Josh Green go and catch drive. It's just like when no one helps, all of a sudden you see the defenders looking around like, whose fault was that? They start casting blame, right? That's demoralizing. A contested three going in or not is not demoralizing. And what slows Giddey down is the uncertainty of whether or not De'Aaron Fox is going to make this read. Now, never helping up strong side corner becomes predictable, and always helping up strong side corner is also predictable. So it's not traded one flaw for another flaw. It's the uncertainty that Giddey doesn't know what to expect, slows him down. He's more hesitant to make the pass to Dort. And that's what I like about certain teams, especially OKC, Sacramento, which is why we picked this game. And the corner, like even to your point, you said about the corner three being more valuable. A corner three in the NBA is still worse than a layup from a points per shot perspective. And I've never understood the idea of like even Steph Curry misses half of his open threes. And if he's wide open, that's a 1.5 point per shot if he makes 50% of them, and he makes less than 50% of them. That is, I'm willing to go up that if it means stopping a guaranteed 2-point layup. This is going to be a pick and roll going to De'Aaron Fox's left, going to the near side of the floor if you are watching from the angle that you have been watching at. On the back side, you have SGA is the low man. He's the back corner. Dort is the weak side elbow, the high eye defender. Typically, SGA is the one who would be tagging this roller, Sabonis coming down. And OKC just doesn't do what's typical because it's typical. For multiple reasons, probably personnel, other things, Dort, the high eye defender, is the one who stays in and tags, and that lets SGA make that read. He can see Dort is tagging, so SGA is the one who is going to close out to this three. And I think he makes this. No, he misses this one. Here's a I kind of kept this one in on purpose because one of the flaws of their defense and their lack of front court height is they give up a lot of offensive rebounding, like some of the worst in the league. Right. And that's one of the drawbacks. For the next play, we have a post up of SGA. And if you notice, I like this one because they purposely put Sabonis one pass away. The guy you would want to dig down against a post up is now the least mobile defender for the Kings. And you can do this because Chet is he's not a capable three-point shooter. He's a good three-point shooter. He has a lot of three-pointers off of movement, off of screens. He's a very good shooter, especially for someone his height. And I think Oklahoma City has been able to punch above its weight, overachieve. With this 5-out spacing, they've made it work. It's not just 5-out spacing as like a magic bullet that always works, but they do cool stuff to make it work. And just right here, there's less help on SGA's post up, and he's killer on this turnaround, especially this year. I love the rise of guard post ups of Booker and some other guys. Here's an inverted pick and roll that is sometimes called in New Zealand. An up screen followed by an under, aka an inverted pick and roll, aka a guard box setting a ball screen for a big Sabonis. This is New Zealand. It's the opposite of what's called Australia, which is a down screen followed by an under or inverted down under. Australia. Out of all the terms of basketball, which I have a nerdy fascination with, New Zealand and Australia are my favorite ones. So we have this, I think, is going to be an example of overhelping. Look at Fox just knocking over Dort on this ball screen. It ain't illegal if you don't get caught. That's my motto. And so right now you have 2 on the ball. Traditionally, you would never put 3 on the ball. 3 on the ball means you have, a 4-on-2 advantage off the ball, okay? Oklahoma City doesn't care that much about that. It's like the opposite of what we were saying earlier, be afraid of a corner 3 so you give up the rim attempt. They will always swarm to protect the rim. Now, because there's all these people, if Sabonis knew Dort was leaving or staying, or SGA was leaving or staying, I think it'd be easier for him to make this read. But because they swarm, because you don't know who exactly is going to commit to you, I think that's what helps them get so many turnovers. And they strip the ball. They do quote unquote wrong defense of 3 on the ball. And just because it's not the norm doesn't mean it doesn't work.
So as you can see here, like Keon Ellis just takes Shai in here. So they're both right here. So it's not as if Shai went out of his way to double on that, right? So as you take it a little more forward, this kind of reminds me of you the illegal defense rule and all of that stuff. The Michael Jordan like lingering in the lane to strip Karl Malone type thing. That's what I think about when a guy takes their defender through the lane and then the guy just lingers there. But this is the Sacramento Pistol 5 stuff, right? And the reason why it's interesting is this is Sabonis. He is a great passer going to his strong hand, right? Strong side, strong hand, running off of the Kings Pistol 5 action. If you watch what Harrison Barnes is going to do in a second, go forward just a little bit. If you watch what Harrison Barnes is going to do right here, he's going to set this sort of pin in, right? But he can't do it. There's no point to it because the swarm has happened. Josh Giddey is basically stuck here, but that presupposes that, Domas is able to see and make this pass. And then if you notice, the other thing I like about this clip in particular is that Giddey is rooted right here, yes, but JDub is already in rotation to De'Aaron. So they're taking, yeah, Giddey has to navigate these two right here. But let's say he's able to get around this screen and Domas is able to throw that pass, or Domas just jump stops right here and Dort's hands aren't there. They've taken all of these away, and my guess would be in this situation you've taken the two passes away, right? So the two easiest passes to make here are the corner skip, which I don't know if that's necessarily easy, or the De'Aaron Fox return pass back to the top. But if I had to guess, JDub is taking De'Aaron. This is contained. So if they hit, I can't remember who's here. It's probably Keegan, right? So Shai would probably be then in rotation to Keegan at that point. And then you have Giddey zoning up too. So I would have loved to have seen what it would look like if, he was able to throw a pass and it didn't get jammed up here, because I want to see what the progressions and rotations look like after that.
So do I. There might be more on that later if we're lucky, depending on how many we get through. And also the skip pass is open because the skip pass, just like we're saying earlier, for the Doxic defensive rules, that's the slowest pass and thus the longest time for the defense to recover,
100%.
And so what I would guess, obviously we don't know for certain what will happen on this play, but the fact that we don't know is kind of what's really cool to me. I would guess that if the pass went out to the player who's off the screen right now, Giddey would consider rotating out to him. It might be a stunt and a fake rotation. It might be a full commit. I don't know. But Oklahoma City's players are so unselfish defensively. It's never about stopping my man. It's about stopping my opponents, stopping our opponents. And it's, Coach Dag, I think, has done some really cool things in Oklahoma City. And they just are fun team to watch, innovative team to watch. This one is pretty self-explanatory. They will put their 6'5" Jalen Williams, JDub, like sometimes he's listed as a shooting guard. They'll put him on centers, which gives them a lot of versatility because you can switch pick and rolls with Sabonis this way, or whoever's playing, center against them. And then they can have Chet roaming, protecting the rim. So if a team has like a non-shooter, you can have a switchable defender. And part of the reason he can do this is because Oklahoma City has some of the most length in the NBA. I think his wingspan is like 9 inches, 8 inches, give or take, depends on, listing or whatever. And they will switch things and be undersized. So one thing you'll see Giddey pinch it in. They're always ready to help. The defense is always ready to commit. It's not about whose rotation is supposed to make it. It's like, can I make that rotation? Should I make that rotation? And just having a lot of size. One thing, the point I want to make in this clip is just the size they have, not front court size, not height, but they have a lot of length. They have a lot of strength. They have a lot of wide bodies. Dort is only 6'3", but he has a wingspan and he has a lot of heft to him for an NBA. He's often compared to announcers are always like, he's built like a NFL player. The position changes, but it's always safety or linebacker or something like that. This is another thing that is against the status quo, and I like it. I think it works. I think other teams do use it, but I think it should become more popular than it is. They will switch and have a tagger. Typically, a switch is considered a 2-on-2 defense. Just the two guys switching are the only two. The whole purpose of switching is to not need help defenders, but they will switch and use a help defender. Here, they're going to switch this empty pick and roll. There's going to be a gator or triangle or throw ahead pass from Sabonis to the roller because now we have Casey Wallace in the game. So look at Casey Wallace is going to switch on to the roller. The roller, I can't tell who that quite is against Lyles. He already has a downhill advantage and not to mention size advantage. But JDub, the low man in the far corner, he is going to switch or he's going to tag this. And what I think would happen if this pass was not a turnover, Casey Wallace would peel off and go to Keegan, or is that Dork? Dork would go to Keegan, and Casey Wallace could peel off and go to Fox. Defenses, 5-6 years ago, the rise of switching, and switching became like pretty hard for a lot of NBA offenses to overcome. And then NBA offenses found a bunch of ways to score against switching. One of them is what you would see in this play, screen below, stay below, where Trey Lyles is screening on the low side of Casey Wallace, and he's going to stay on the low side, right? So this, without JDub's help, is a runaway layup or dunk, right? Actually, Casey Wallace, I think, tips that pass, so good for him. Another area of positional length. Tagging or helping, even though you're switching, is, I think, a good way to negate some of the switch beaters, the screen below, stay below, a few other ones as well. And Oklahoma City, it's like that, whatever that quote that I kind of know from Seinfeld when he messes it up, is some people look at the world the way it is and they ask why. I look at where it could be and say, why not? They say, why not a lot. Here's a term that I've used with Evin before and he's not a fan of. It's not a term I invented. It's a term I am using, dork or dorking. So dork is a non-shooting perimeter player. Dorking is when you sag off a non-shooting perimeter player. So just because let's say you put Ben Wallace top of the key, if his defender sags off of him, that's dorking Ben Wallace. Or not Ben Wallace, I didn't say Ben Simmons, but I guess we're against Ben Wallace as well. So Giddey, I think in the rotation, has the lowest three-point percentage, and they will do things I mentioned earlier about how the Rockets would put their worst shooter in the strong side corner. They will do the same thing with Giddey. They will do things to hide his perimeter shooting compared to his other skills. So here, first I just want to point out that this is a late switch or a veer back switch sometimes, where pick and roll, Sabonis is going to try to be in drop and recover to Jay Will, the screener, but Keon Ellis is going to peel off and veer back, late switch on to Jay Will. So we have an advantage. And one of the things, so right here, I see closes out. Now, one of the things I like about some of these pill switching, other new defensive strategies, is that they can often negate an earlier switch. So right here, you can tell Keon Ellis to purposely close out hard to Jay Will, force him to drive, because when he drives right back into Sabonis. And that just lets you switch right back. So right here, Sabonis is going to switch back onto his man. Keon Ellis is going to peel off. Barnes stunts or recovers, or does he rotate the whole way? Yeah, he rotates, okay? And then Keon Ellis peels off the Chet. So you have the veer back switch to negate the pick and pop. You have the peel switch to negate the drive by Jay Will, because you can do it off of the strong side wing or top of the key, because you're peel switching off the dork. So you'll see teams do this a lot. The weakest perimeter shooter of the other team, his defender will sag off, and he can switch onto the ball handler because that gives the most time to recover out to him. And also, if you notice this, look how far he's stunting in. If you talk about peel switching the dork, look how far the nail defender is stunted in. Evin?
Yeah. The one thing I did want to say, though, if you want to dial it back to when Harrison Barnes closes out, is also this isn't it's a very soft closeout. It's a half step. Yeah. And then he's like, well, he's not gonna shoot. Okay, let me just switch on. And then Ellis takes his, right? So it's not as if I think this was meant to be a stunt if Giddey loaded up to shoot it. But because he didn't, it's just an outright switch because, Giddey is a dangerous passer as well. So to that point, it's just like you're negating every possible advantage here. I do think Fox over rotates, right? When later on, when on the Giddey drive, Fox I think over rotates a little bit.
Yeah, and one thing before we go to the Giddey drive, the angle of Harrison Barnes' closeout, I've seen other people talk about this, but he kind of closes out in the passing lane to Chet.
Yes.
So he's closing out. So if Chet, he wants to make that pass because you have like a 29% shooter, whatever he is, to a much better shooter. Now, why is he so open? You recognize the alignment of him from last week? We have weak side dunker spots, empty weak side corner, weak side wing. If JDub was in the corner instead of in a dunker spot, his defender, I think it's Keegan, I can't really tell from here, he could stunt at Chet. But now he's too far away because of this 4.5 out, the empty weak side corner, that you can't rotate the Chet. So this, would you call it a fake stunt or a fake rotation? Whatever it is. It's also in the passing lane, and it's also 4.5 out, which means you can't have another rotation after this. So now you want to go to Giddey's drive, you said.
Excuse me, I guess it wasn't Giddy's drive. It was the Giddy swing. So Fox, if you dial it back to when Giddy passes it, Fox doesn't is still recovering, I guess, from no, I guess he's not. So Fox is helping off of strong side corner, or he stunts off a
He's
strong side
stunted,
corner,
yeah.
right? Yeah. So when we get to this part right here, he doesn't need to be that far in the paint.
No.
Yeah. So that creates the long closeout for him, and that's basically what gives it the advantage, which works well for the purposes of this clip because now he's in the paint. Harrison Barnes is all the way off of Josh Giddey, which again breaks the rule of like, one pass away. One pass, right? So
Right. I
yeah,
think it's a
yeah,
foul. Now, do you think Fox was trying to force Dort to the middle? That's one of the doxic rules, the status quo rules I didn't mention earlier. I messed up. For however long in NBA, it's always no middle. There are exceptions, especially scouting on individual players. But typically, you would teach Fox to force Dort to drive not to the middle, not to the free throw line, but to his right, toward the baseline, toward the sideline. However, the devil's avocado counter argument is that it also can kind of help to force the drive towards the dork because Barnes can help off Giddey more than Sabonis can help off Jay Will. Jay Will in that corner is a higher point per shot attempt than Giddey from the weak side above the break, weak side wing, right? So I don't know if it's intentional or not, but you'll see teams, Golden State has done it, OKC does it. They will purposely shade the player towards the gap defender, and Barnes can be more in the gap because Giddey is not as strong of a shooter as some of his teammates. I don't know if it's intentional, but it is something I notice. I think you drew a foul there. Not a great closeout, probably not what they purposely did, but
right. To me too, a thing about it is like the body angle. Like how does Fox close out? And that to me dictates like where he's shading the guy. Body angles on closeouts are everything to me. So
Fox's balance is off, which is why Dort can drive to the left, but it's his weak hand. It's toward the gap defender. Even if it's not intentional, it is food for thoughts. All right. Example number 8. Overhelp on paint touches. We have the scare quotes on overhelp because overhelp makes it sound like it's a mistake, and it seems to be part of the design. So Sabonis has the ball. He has 2 defenders within arm's reach of him. Jay Will is going to still flock to the ball. Now we have 3. So I think their overhelp, we have 3 guys on the ball right here, is partially how they can have such a great defensive rim field goal percentage, even when Chet's not in the ball game. They overhelp and recover. I think this is another offensive rebound, which if the strategy has a weakness, I think stays OKC ball or goes OKC ball, but offensive rebounding is the biggest weakness. And the playoffs, I am very curious to see how that plays out against a team
right.
that has 4 to 7 games against them. We have a Spain Leak, which is very close to roll and replace action. We have a rejected pick and roll. There's a reason the guy with the ball is the MVP candidate. This technique does not stop him. Doesn't mean it's not a technique worth analyzing a bit further. But you'll see Isaiah Joe is leaking out to the side. His defender is staying home to protect the rim. And then the on-ball defender is going to peel off SGA right here, and he's going to go out to Isaiah Joe. Now, Shai is very, very good at this part of the game, and he's just going to Euro for an easy layup. But pill switching against the Spain League, I like this. Here's another example of what I'm calling overhelp. So we have a drive. This is a strong side corner. He doesn't need to fully commit, but he can if he needs to. And you mentioned this play specifically as well. We have Shake can, in my opinion, they can get away with more gambling, more nail stunts, more aggressive help defense because of some of these defensive techniques. So once again, Shai is going to he's going to be a little bit too far committed to this. But you kind of do want to overcommit if that means getting the ball out of De'Aaron Fox's hand, especially now that he's like shooting 38% of 3 on like 7 attempts a game. Is crazy. De'Aaron Fox is having a great season. This drive, in my opinion, is probably more complicated because the ball handler does not know if Chet's going to help or not. Traditionally, never help off strong side corner, but OKC messes tradition up. So here we have 3 guys on the ball, a 4th guy a foot away from the paint, and I think actually it should have been a turnover of not passing before. I mean, unless they're Caitlin Cooper and Alberton, jump passes don't always work. I give Caitlin Cooper funny examples whenever there's a counter. It's like, oh, Laurie Markkinen, turnover off a jump pass. It helps to be Halliburton. But I think that's a turnover, and the pass was out of bounds. Two turnovers for the price of one, just because you have this quote unquote bad overhelping. I think this is okay. Another overhelp example. Weak side Chicago, it gets rejected. Oh yeah. So you and I both talk about this is the part of the play. You and I both talk about. You said earlier we have in our conversations about the cutter's defender, especially when they get. It's my pet peeve when my players, their matchup will cut and they turn their back to the ball and there's a layup right behind them because they're like, well, my man didn't score. It's my pet peeve. My pet peeve. So you have the Kings are doing this a lot, and there are actually some examples of this seeding. But his man is cutting to the corner. He cleanses himself, gets out of the paint to avoid a defensive 3-second. And here we have all five defenders have a foot on the paint right now. It's overhelping because they want to give up this shot. Sacramento made a lot of these, including this one, but the strategy did not work out in the first half. It worked out in the second half. Law of averages. Another overhelp. Okay. We have 3 on the ball right now. Wow. This is okay. Maybe jump passes are good now. I forgot about this one. Oh, nope, not another turnover.
Right. Not all jump passes, but what I will say is this also is the best example of giving if we want to talk about for the playoffs, giving teams just more stuff to have to handle, more stuff to have to prepare for. If you go back to episode 1, I talked about how sometimes you throw actually, excuse me, I don't know if it made the final cut, but what I did talk about to you, I don't know if it necessarily made the recording, is I do it right before halftime where you throw out a zone or something like that, knowing that the coach will spend a little time game planning for it at halftime, which eats away into what he wants it to do. Is how are you supposed to game plan for something that you can't predict? Helping off the strong side corner, switching on the pick and roll, but then tagging anyway, appealing, throwing 3 at the ball, or I think in your notes you referred to it as a swarm, and that's how I would describe it too on the Kings Pistol 5 action where Fox sets that screen for Sabonis. How are you supposed to game plan for the incredible unpredictability of everything OKC throws at you?
I would say you game plan for that the same way they game plan for you. You tell your players to read and react, not to predict. I tell my players sometimes react, don't react. Like respond to what you see, not what you think you're going to see. And just as okay, so one of the things we'll do is we'll do like a 4-on-3 drill. That's a kind of a common one where the ball will pass around and the 3 players have to make the rotations. And you have to learn to work on the fly. And one thing I believe a lot of people have said is that the next generation, the young basketball players, the future NBA players, they don't do enough live pickup games. Too much is scripted. I think you practice playing unscripted to know whatever happens, just react, live with it, and live to find another day.
Right.
All right. So for the last example from this game, this is there's a pick and pop with a veer back switch that yada yada. We've seen that already. This is the part I want to get to is he's about to run a pick and roll with, I think it's Giddy. So he's going to reset here. All right. So right here with the pick and roll, Chet is screening for Giddy to go to his left, which means traditionally the tagger would come from the right. It would be Harrison Barnes on JDub in the backside corner. Sacramento has Sabonis switch on to Aaron Wiggins. And so the guy they would want to keep close to the hoop is in the side of the court that would typically stay home, they are going to contradict the tradition of tagging off the backside of a pick and roll. And OKC is going to exploit it. But then there's going to use pill switching to negate the exploitation. So here we have a pick and roll. You see Sabonis is tagging all the way in. And this is the reason you typically don't do it this way. You don't tag him this way. Because Giddey's pass to Wiggins, it's easier for Giddey to see Wiggins than it is for him to see JDub. He has his back to JDub. That's why you traditionally tag off a JDub on the backside. And this pass can be a straight line drive pass. All right. And Sabonis, one thing I like about pill switching is you can purposely have hard closeouts, get them off the 3-point line, and you negate that advantage with the pill switch. So Sabonis has a hard closeout to Wiggins, and he forces Wiggins to the baseline. So Giddey's defender is actually going to be the one to stop Aaron Wiggins' drive. Typically, he stays home. Typically, the guys on this side of the court would be the low man, but instead, the strong side elbow is going to come down to stop the drive. So Sabonis can peel off and go back to Giddey. Once again, this is, I mentioned earlier, you pill switch off of the worst perimeter shooter from the opposing team, right? You break the norm of tagging out the backside of the pick and roll so you can keep Sabonis close to the hoop. B, you let Sabonis have a hard closeout and take away a three because the thing you give up is the baseline drive, which gets negated by the strong side elbow pill switch. Now, they lose track of their man, Dort, I think is the other guy, and Dort comes out for the three. So there's a breakdown in it. That's part of the thing that you and I were talking about earlier. How do you avoid some of these breakdowns? And I think one of the things is that you can't. But I'm willing to live with an unpredictable breakdown if it means not giving up a predictable layup. And anyways, that's the sum of all of my clips. I know you have some of your own you want to share.
All right. So for this one, you can see the label. It says help one pass away. And it breaks the mold of what's called conventional predictable defenses, right? So let's say, this is Case and Wallace right here. And that's City Sissoko. As a high school coach, would you feel comfortable if your defender is at nail help with the shooter like this easy pass away?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because this may be a cheat answer, but the distance from the nail to the 3-point line is going to be shorter on a high school court. B, the quality of shooter is going to be lower. C, I really believe in pack the paint, force kickouts, right?
Okay.
It would depend if it was a certain shooter, I wouldn't want to help off of him. But in general, I would rather overhelp than underhelp.
Right. And I mean, in this situation, the ball ends up popping out and we get into, and actually, let's just watch the run out. The point of the clip isn't necessarily to say, OKC, these are the things they always do. It's that they defy convention in a very specific sense, right? So
yeah,
when you get into what the hell are you supposed to do with all these different things, right? And sometimes they do things normally, and sometimes things don't work out, like you were saying. But here is another example of just let it play, and then you tell me what you see out of this. Right?
I feel like the Cooler Runnings quote of, what do you see? I see a lost little boy. I see a defense that messes up, but is so comfortable with discomfort that they can compensate for a mistake. Case of Wallace, a few other OKC players are prospects who impress me with their high feel for the game. And part of the thing, I don't know if it counts as part of feel, but I consider it part of feel, is equanimity, staying calm under pressure. It's sort of like I remember there was a study, and one of the studies what they found out was that NBA players, after making a mistake, the best reaction was to laugh it off the players who laughed it off were the most effective at played well after the mistake.
Right.
And it's that easygoingness to like accept blame, but not fixate on, I messed up. I'm so, like, don't fixate on your teammate's mistake, but don't ignore it. If you go back to, can you pull it back up? Because I feel like it was like a Miami action into a ball screen. So there's gonna be a handoff into a double ball screen. Is that right?
Yeah.
I misspoke for a second ago. Okay. So So if you pause it, it's a handoff that goes into a double ball screen. So like a 77 Miami
Yes.
is what I would call it, but there's other terms for it. Now, Case of Wallace 22 is on Devontae Graham, who's the second screener. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I feel he messes up right here. JDub can't get back to it. Case of Wallace is screening his own man. Okay.
Yep.
Case of Wallace knows it, and right here he kind of groans. You can almost see him put his head back. He's groaning. However, he doesn't give up in the play. He pokes and gets a steal out. This is I love. It's probably not a smart thing to be in love with, but I love watching players who make a mistake and immediately are like, all right, how can I make up for that mistake? It's probably better to not make a mistake in the first place. But Case of Wallace, and he gets a little mad here, which kind of, but the fact that he recovers it all is a great sign. He never quits on this play. So what I see is a rookie Case of Wallace. JDub is only in his second year, but he feels like so much more of a veteran. Maybe because he was an older rookie, especially compared to Case of Wallace. So what I see is Case of Wallace doesn't know if he's supposed to switch this or hedge and recover. He seems to be hedging and recover, but he bumps into JDub. I think probably he messes this up because Devontae Graham is like 5'10". He does not set a lot of ball screens. All right. Devontae Graham is a point guard, so we have an inverted pick and roll here. Part of the reason inverted pick and rolls work is that you're forcing a defender, such as a small guard, a point guard like Case of Wallace, who's like 6'3", I think. You're forcing him to do what typically a big would do on defense. He has not hedged a lot of screens in his life, I would assume, right? He's dodged them. I remember him being a great point of attack, on ball defender against pick and rolls. But I don't remember him defending a lot of screeners of pick and rolls. So Kenrick and Gordon are switching this. There's the point switch that's, used to be taboo and is now coming back in vogue, which is maybe a theme of this episode. We have, it looks like a head switch from JDub to force him away from the ball, but he does it. He gets blindsided by the screen. I wonder if Case and Wallace called it out. You can't tell, obviously, but I'd be curious if that's partially. And then right here, I think JDub is letting up because he thinks Case and Wallace is there. Case and Wallace is doing the opposite because he thinks JDub has him. He groans, but he recovers. Gordon Hayward is also tagging from the high eye defender. Okay, cool. So for right here, Kenrick would typically be the Kenrich or Kenrick. I always forget. Kenrich. He would be the low man and he'd be rotated over, but never let what you're supposed to do prevent you from doing what you should do. Like, don't worry about what's designed to happen. Do what's best to happen. And there's a messed up screen that's not really fully communicated. Inverted pick and roll, clever offensive play. Case of Wallace recovers from his mistake.
But the interesting thing about this to me is here you go. You got, I already called it out, but switch, right? Switch.
Switch again.
Hedge to switch, right? And then Devontae pops, right? Which is an interesting thing because I feel like Kaysen is caught between two minds. That's my biggest thing. I was going to say, to your point, yes, you'd rather the guy not make a mistake, but basketball is an imperfect game. So what you do after the mistake means more than making the mistake itself. So
mistakes are inevitable. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Kaysen, I think, he is supposed to just a flat out switch this, but because because of the angle Kaysen takes too, like JDub doesn't have a chance to even, he would have to go around this way, right? Effectively navigate that screen as well, like you were saying. But because of the miscommunication, you see the drop in the shoulders, drop in the head. Giddy is there. He could take a swipe, whatever. But Hayward does the right thing and he stops the ball. Kenrich pinches in from the corner, right? Which are good things. And then as the pass comes, Kaysen recovers. But there are basically like four guys in the paint, and then
Yeah.
JDub is like a half step away. So it's your principles are able to overcome the fact that the play got or the conventional rotation slash coverage got messed up, right? So I think that's what it's all about too, is that OKC, regardless of what happens, they are able to, they're doing what they got to do. And I mean, it's not as if every single OKC defensive possession is unconventional, right? So here I have this as conventional drop because to me that's what it is,
It's
right? So what
yeah.
yeah, so what's gonna happen here is um it's J Will, right? It's gonna be a rip DHO or yeah, a rip DHO with Devontae and Kaysen. And these are two guys who same thing as they're fairly new to the league. This is typical drop, right?
Yeah.
Collins is a short pop, and then they're trying to hit the X out with these two defenders just pinched in, right, to take that away. Giddy on the tag, and then right there they try to throw the skip, which what I was telling you about the Sabonis skip Harrison Barnes pin in right there. But this time they're able to take it away.
Is
So
that
another run out. Yeah.
um so as soon as Jay Will starts retreating, I think Devontae, I don't know if he should take the shot, but I think he should consider it perhaps more than it seems like he is. So like a half a second after this, when Jay Will starts reverting right
That
there,
one. Yeah. Yeah.
uh, yeah, I mean it's way easier when you can pause it and slow motion than on the fly. But also, I think he's got to put more arc on this pass.
Yeah. But
But
also
yeah,
the 1-2 is such an interesting thing to do in this position instead of I mean we're both high school coaches, right? So we drill playoff two. But if he goes two right here, he has the option of I mean he still has the option of stepping through, but when you go hard left right in this spot, you give yourself no options. If he takes a jump stop right here, right, to maybe cover more ground. Now you can get a sort of a paint touch. That's where you end up. If this were high school, this is the tape I'd be breaking down, obviously. But
yeah, you can
this
tell he's
is oh,
a Kansas Jayhawk, not a Villanova Wildcat with that lack of a jump stop.
whew. But yeah, yeah. So the reason why I brought those clips up is to just say like not every single OKC defensive possession is an experimentation or read and react type of situation, right? It is
Right.
they have hard and fast rules. And what I said last episode that you referenced at the top is if you communicate and you're the first to say something, even if it's the wrong coverage, to me, you drill that if you're talking first, it doesn't matter if you're wrong because the in between the no man's land kills you, right? You go for it. And if you swing big and miss big, cool, we'll live with that because it's on you and your teammates as well. So.
I mean, he who talks first is right is also my family's debate strategy at Thanksgiving.
But yeah, if I remember correctly, your now watch this drive is from this game. Is that right?
It is.
Let's get into it.
That's good. All right. Now watch this drive. You mentioned something about like playoff matchups. How do you plan against an unpredictable defense? Now, it's a lot of times the rotations are predictable, but they're not always, hence the name. However, there's some things you can predict, like they're going to swarm, they're going to help, they are going to peel off of cutters to protect the rim instead of blindly follow the cutter to the weak side corner. So here we have a cut into an empty ball screen, which I know you do a continuity, or at least you used to do a continuity. I don't know if you still do like this. But we have an empty ball screen. As we were saying earlier, when the ball handler is going to the right, you typically want to tag off the left, but there's nobody in this left corner, so you have to tag off the right corner. Okay. So they're going to do Sacramento's corner players, Barnes and I can't read this, Davion Mitchell, I think, are going to baseline exchange slash the Danny Green cut from Davion Mitchell right here. You don't always know how OKC is going to react to penetration, but you know they're going to pinch in, swarm, shrink the floor, especially against a pick and roll like this. So watch Davion Mitchell. You know what's happening. I saw you chuckle. And watch Sabonis. So Chet is doing what I was praising earlier, or I was criticizing the inverse, which is being more concerned with your off-ball cutter than with stopping the opponent from scoring. So he is perhaps overcorrecting, you could say, because when Davion Mitchell comes all the way over here, there is no Oklahoma City Thunder to follow this. Now, Sabonis, I think, also does a little bit of uses his body in a very smart way, where he sort of is screening these two guys, a short roll to get the Danny Green cut out to the side. Now, because you know they're going to pinch in, you know they're going to lose track of Davion Mitchell cut into the strong side corner. Danny Green cut because Danny Green for the Spurs in what, 2013 or 2014? In the finals against Miami Heat, he made a living off of this. When LeBron James and the Heatles, they would lose track of him because they're trying to tag the roller. They're trying to do what we were saying we should do earlier. Don't give up a layup or cover out. Don't be so afraid of corner three that you give up a layup. So they're staying in. We have four guys with a foot in the paint. So the offense doesn't always know how the defense is going to react, but you do know they're going to pinch in on empty pick and rolls like this. If I threw this back to you, what would you do as a defense here differently? Empty pick and roll. Let's just say empty pick and roll with a Danny Green cut. If you're prioritizing helping, shrinking the floor, swarming, what would you do differently here as a defense?
What's interesting to me about this play, just before I answer your question, is dial it back just a smidge, right when the pass is but right when the Keegan pass is thrown, right?
Right here?
So I had it right there. That's perfect. So I had this in my notes and if PD Webb is watching this, please tweet this clip out. Because I love talking to him about this, is this right here. You know Davion is going, right? You know he's going. To me, right here, you have the opportunity to, if you're Domas, to do what's called the dummy, right? Which is basically, you're right here. The pass is going to go over your head. You don't have to touch it. You could leave it, soccer style. And it is going. And you could still end up screening for these two guys right here and take all of that away. You could just dummy that. That's a great read by Domas first and foremost, but tremendous to be all on the same page about that. Now, as for what I would do to stop it, it depends on when you want me to start loading up defensively, right? So if you're saying, how do I stop this play? Generally, take me back, if you want to take it back to the top. If you feel like you can, as Barnes cuts through, I don't know how worried you are about Harrison Barnes, right? But you can leave Kenrich. Yeah, you can leave him right there. And instead of chasing, if Kenrich stays right here in this spot, Davion has to go through him to get there. Then it's no longer open because you have J. Will as the X5. You have Joe on Keegan already in a chase. Yes, if you need to, you can peel the Shai and then he can take right here. It all depends on what exactly you want to do in this situation, but I would just limit the options over there. Now, if you want to take it, go ahead.
I will, but before we do that, also, if you notice, Kenrich he's not seeing both ball and man. He is turning his back to the play. Secondly, it's clever that this is not it's almost not an exchange of a simultaneous cut in opposite directions because you can just switch that. It's almost clever that it's like one cut to the far corner and then Davion cuts back over to the near corner, right?
Right.
I really think at this point, Kenrich has got to realize, hey, me and Chet should switch this. But also the
Yes.
other option is sort of like Isaiah Joe. It's hard to do in this example, but one thing is if he peels off of Keegan at some point and you recognize, or it could be Jay Will, but also Kenrich maybe should have handled it slightly differently. I would prefer to switch the baseline exchange, and Kenrich can do exactly what you were saying. Or there's could be opportunities for Isaiah Joe, the on-ball defender, to peel off, which is something OKC would do that wasn't very typical 5 years ago. Now you want me to go forward?
Yeah. So let's say Kenrich goes ahead and makes a mistake, right? What you have here is the Davion thing. I mean, it depends on if you want to live with that. But what you have here in this spot is you can go right before Keegan releases the pass. If you have Shai already pinched in, this to me is this. It's Shai here to like fully commit to the peel. Isaiah takes Ellis right there. And then JDub is the next viable guy, but he doesn't know the baseline cut is happening, right? So that's a communication error as well. So if JDub knows he's there, this is a straight line there because if the pass is dropped off to Domas, then Chet can verticality that, right? So that's how I would do.
Jay Will, for the record.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
How can
JDub
you
is
be
such a good
confused by two
defender.
teammates having the same name and the same
Right.
enter the league at the same time?
JDub is such a good defender. I just want to keep talking about him. That's the whole thing.
He is. He's a fun defender. Yeah, I like that a lot as well. You know, you kind of mentioned next scene. What if SGA peels off onto Keegan? Joe could peel off onto, I think it's Keanu's. You mentioned earlier, how do you plan against unplannable defense? And I was like, because they ran this, I think, 4 times because Alex Flood had an offensive foul, if I remember. But yeah, the Danny Green cut to the strong side corner. It's things like this. Sacramento did a few things in this game where I was like, they were ready to play OKC stuff that's like, oh, that's pretty smart. And just because we think something's innovative or cool or perhaps should inspire other defenses doesn't mean it's like a magic bullet. And it's more about like, can you overachieve with the parts you have? And if so, you're probably doing something other teams can learn from. So,
Absolutely.
yeah. Now, do you have one to share with us?
I actually have two, and I thought it'd be interesting because you did the lion's share of the OKC clipping. So I figured I'd present you with two.
All right.
One is, I mean, we had originally talked about a different sort of game of the week, but we decided to pivot, right? So the one I decided to grab is the Houston Orlando game was the original one we chose and then turned into a blowout. So we were like, whatever, we'll pivot. Okay. So I'm gonna let this play run through. You tell me what you see, you tell me what you like, and then we can talk about it.
All right. It's funny you brought this up because I was watching a different team do this. It almost felt like they were doing it on purpose. So if you pause it right here, it looks like Jabari in the weak side wing is setting a down screen for Cam Whitmore to come, Chicago accent, become get a handoff. He rejects
Right.
it. So we both have cuts into empty side pick and rolls. That's pretty funny that we both picked that. All right. So what happens here? Isaac looks like did he gamble for the steal or is he trying to ice this anticipated pick and roll? If he's trying to ice it, is that a gamble for what do you think? It's hard to see
I think he's gambling because he never I think he if I had to guess, Mo Wagner is communicating that that this is going to be a Chicago, right? Or somebody's
Yeah.
communicating that it's going to be a Chicago. So I think Isaac is trying to just take it away because he
Yeah,
can't.
because
I don't think he sees it.
yeah, and if he is icing, he's icing prematurely because you would need Mo Wagner to be in drop to protect against this drive. Now,
Yes.
Cole Anthony is doing what we were talking about praise a second ago, peels off of his cutter to protect the rim. Um, I thought Isaac was going to swap that at first second.
It is tremendous, right? It is a fantastic finish first and foremost.
Look at the ground coverage. And
Yeah, but look at that right there. That's just fun.
It's fun. So I have this thing. It's like whenever, so a lot of NBA Twitter wasn't high on Jabari Smith, and I didn't hadn't watched much of him at that point. But I saw it whenever someone is like trash, not trash, but criticized by a lot of people. The like middle child in me is always like wants to help defend him, and so
Sure.
I've been like, and whenever someone gets a lot of praise, I always want to I want to find the negative,
Take him
or
down
I
a
do the
peg, yeah.
opposite or it's like I want to root for the guy because and which is like I don't think people were trashing him. They just were like Carroll's the better prospect, and I think I agree with that. And it's just that I saw enough flashes to like in Jabari. Yeah, he's maybe not the good prospect as Carroll. However, I've always been a strong believer in his skill sets and seeing him this season, especially his 3-point percentage rise back up to the levels we kind of always knew he was going to get back up to, and ball skills with this. I really wanted to do Houston Rockets as a game, especially before they got eliminated from the playoffs, because they can do a lot of fun things on defense. They are very similar to OKC in that regard, of like size everywhere. You think of Amen Thompson, Dylan Brooks, Jalen Green, Jabari, Eason, Whitmore. I'm missing somebody. Size up and down the roster lets you do a lot of cool things, and you don't really have to compensate. I mean, Ben Vliet is short, but he's a solid. He's no shocker, even though he went to Wichita State, that he can like handle himself. And they do a lot of cool things on defense that we'll probably talk about at some point, especially next season. I am curious to see how they build on what they've done this season.
Absolutely. I agree with you. And here's the second one.
Okay. Okay. Quinn Snyder, head coach of Atlanta Hawks, has been doing this thing on ATOs since back in Utah Jazz. He will put his non-shooting center in a corner, like a dead corner is something I call this. Other people call it as well. But Bruno Fernando is at the top of the screen. Is at that backside corner. Because he's not a shooter, his defender is going to help off him. This almost only happens on ATOs. But what you're going to see, blind handoff, blind pig, DHO, whatever you want to call it, you want to get the pressure in. You have this, blind pig handoff. I don't think the Crutchy sells it very well. He lets Brandon, or maybe Brandon Miller's got good defense here by not relaxing. But what you want to do is make that defender relax. The Miami Heat did this a lot against Jokic in the finals. If you think of Jokic as Bruno Fernando's defender here, that was pretty clever. A lot of like blind DHOs to Duncan Robinson. Yeah, what do you think on this? I love this play. I love the different things Quinn Snyder does with these dead corner, but the non-shooting center in the corner. Even back when he had Gobert, he was at exit screens. He would do these handoffs. He would set a flare or hammer and slip the flare. I was just gonna say, this reminds me. I remember the first time I watched Brandon Miller, and I said something of Brandon Miller a year ago as a prospect, and you were like, "Look, you were always gonna like Brandon Miller." It was something funny like that. And this is a good on-ball defense, not to relax. Maybe he knew the ATO was coming. I very impressed with this defensively. I like this play offensively. Wait, is that I got the wrong player? Did I? I can't read who that is. That's Garrison. My bad.
Yeah, that's Garrison. Yeah.
That's Garrison Matthews. I misspoke.
No, but I mean, regardless of who the shooter is, right? I think you would want to take a half step this way as the pass is thrown, right? Because the whole point of the blind pig type action, a backdoor step type action, is to have the pressure release valve, or at least to get downhill ability. So what I would like to see in this spot is one step further this way, one big step further this way. So you started here. So your one lateral move is right into the handoff right away. And Brandon Miller has no choice but to get hung up off of it. Because he's got too much length and size. That's a great contest. That's everything you'd want out of this defensive possession. But if you were to run this back-to-back times, to me, what I would do in this spot is, if it worked the first time or you get a clean look the second time, right here is you would fake the pitch, and then you could get downhill, force the defense to collapse, and then you could make a kick. And that's a bigger ask, like for a non-shooting center than I would be comfortable with. But I'm saying that if I were to run this
I was going to say that.
play successfully the first
When
time, yeah.
Kong was in the game, they do a lot of keepers on this. Here's the thing I'm going to ask you right now. Out of all the defenders, if you're the offense, you're the Hawks, of all the defenders on the floor right now, which one would you want to have on Bruno Fernando?
Oh man, this is a well, I mean, if I had to pick anyone, it would be Davis, right?
Yeah.
Maybe Davis Bertans in the face mask right there. So that's that's what I would do in that spot. But in a perfect world, you get a lot of
So
different
my
things.
thing is, I wonder. So you put Grant Williams is 6'6", he's mobile. He's not the guy you want to be targeting with this play. So I don't remember this specific one if Grant Williams was previously on Bruno Fernando, but if it's an ATO and the center is in the corner for the Atlanta Hawks, anticipate something like this. You would want to maybe cross match that and put Grant Williams on him if he's not already.
Yeah, but hey, predictable versus unpredictable. That was the point of this, right?
Right.
So that's gonna have to do it for us this week. As always, the Basketball Action Dictionary, our socials below. If you want to reach out, if there's something you like want us to cover in particular that we find interesting, we'll cover it if it's there. But yeah, that's it for us for this week. We look forward to seeing and hearing from you guys soon.
Ready to Die 2 episode 2 is in the books.